Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our People Committee. Delighted that so many of you are here. If I drop off the call, could I ask that Tom steps in and chair until I get reconnected, please? Obviously, welcome our trade unions, our staff associations, and HMICS, who always are very welcome and add to the richness of our discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have a representation from ASPs just due to diary clashes. Just as a reminder for those of you who are here for the first time, in terms of clarity, papers are presented, initial comments and questions from SPA board members, staff associations and trade unions can then provide a perspective for members, not questions, but then members will be free to ask further questions should they need to. So this morning I have received apologies from Alistair Hay, but we are still quorate. I've received no declarations of interest, unless there is anything additional. No. So our minute of our meeting on the 30th of May, are people content to approve this as an accurate record? Okay, can we move on then to our action log, please? So, entry and duty is proposed to ongoing in terms of the briefing in November. People content with that? Any questions that people might want to ask? No. Operational base levels. Now, we've received a briefing, and thank you very much for the briefings we received. It's always helpful to have these briefings to give us further written evidence of assurance. Can I ask board members if there's anything that they want to raise on OBL? Can I ask a question, please, in terms of the 16.4% abstraction for annual leave? Is that applied constantly? So do we always have that amount of officers on annual leave at any one time, which then gives the consistency of not having peaks and troughs? Can someone advise me on that?
Chair, I think I can offer you a comment. I'm trying to work out how to put my hand up on Teams. Our aim,
right, okay.
Our aim is to try and maintain a maximum of 16% abstraction as a consequence of annual leave for police officers. I suspect there'll be some instances where it will be below 16%, but that is our optimum level that we're trying to work towards.
Okay. And then the other aspect is the OBL in terms of, so I completely understand it's normal business practice for additional annual leave over and above what would be rostered for, so that 16.4% would be declined. That's normal business practice and makes complete sense. The OBL, have they been altered and changed since the reduction in officer numbers? How has that worked? Are we trying to maintain old levels, or have we rescheduled our OBLs over the last year?
I think from my perspective, and if there's any other colleagues from Police Scotland share, I would sense that the OBLs are relatively historic, and it's a broad guide that we would try to maintain where we can, but we will quite frequently see our levels drop a little bit below OBLs. So I think there is work ongoing just now around our target operating model, and there is a need to revise OBLs more generally, because notwithstanding our police officers' numbers, I don't think they take full cognizance of some changes across the organisation. So they're there as a guide, maybe more so than an obligatory position that we try to maintain and adopt.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think I'm hearing you saying in some cases they might be increased, in some cases they might be decreased, depending on, you know, how circumstances have changed. But our revised model for policing will be looking at a completely different perspective. Okay. Any comments from, and I see from Jack, this has been covered under local policing. Okay. So members content to close that as suggested? Yep. We're now on officer safety training. Again, we received a very helpful briefing. There is a proposal to close this. Do any members want to raise anything in this? Tom.
I know it's within the body of reports later on, but the whole issue around officer safety training and those out of card at the moment is significant. I think the percentage was up to nearly a third. Are we able to close that at this stage?
So I was concerned because one of the questions I have is, I have two questions. First of all, are there any redeployment as a consequence of people being out of card because they're not able to be deployed to their duties? And secondly, when will everyone, so recognising there is always going to be peaks and troughs, but I think we're quite a way away from that. So if we're up at 95% of people completed their training, I would be reasonably content that there's always going to be, for a variety of reasons, sickness, absence, annual leave, people not quite managing to get their training, but there does seem quite a gap. So I would want to understand when that gap will be closed. So I'm with Tom. I'm uncomfortable about closing it at the moment. Do we have any advice on when the gap will be closed and whether or not staff are redeployed to other duties if they've not had their training? Alan.
Chair, DCC Spears, apologies. I don't have any ability on this system to put my hand up. This sits under my remit. I'm chairing the People Board. Officer safety training and compliance is now a standing agenda item. Currently, we have about 75% of officers trained in OST, so the numbers are changing and fluctuating quite frequently. The two, that is a concern that I have, and hence the reason it's a standing agenda item. This is not down to the availability of training courses. This is down to officers getting onto the training courses. And one of the actions that I've given to ACC Houston is to look specifically at when does being out of card have a consequence that we might need to look at the redeployment of officers, and can we ensure that so the 75% now also includes officers who might be in non-front facing roles, who might be modified in duties. So I need to get a clear understanding of what proportion of officers who need to be officer safety training are officer safety training. So I suspect the 75% would then go a little bit higher. But I mean, to give you an assurance, I don't see this now as a consequence of us having a training pause at Christmas time at the end of last year. I think it's about division's ability to free up officers to participate in officer safety training. So I'm happy to bring back, if you want to either bring back a paper or an update to the next committee, but I would probably share Tom's view that it's probably not in a position to close that action off.
Okay, Deb Spears, thanks very much indeed. Tom?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I've got real sympathy for the position that DCC Spears expressed there. That's probably every bit as concerning, that if the training's available and staff are not being released to take up that training or are avoiding it, that takes into a deep issue about how it's seen and valued. And it's not an issue till something goes wrong, as we know. And I suppose in many ways, by not closing it just now and by taking quite a firm stance as a committee in expectations, it adds weight to that message from DCC Spears to local policing and specialist resources that this is not optional. This is actually a requirement of the post. So I would not close it, but I would also send that strong message back through DCC Spears to the operational officers that frankly are not taking up the requirement to be trained.
Agreed. Thanks, Tom. And I think if we look forward to that further report from DCC Spears, and I think in particular that pulling off, and I know that I think we are getting much better data, and therefore that can either give us assurance or not. And as we're moving forwards, that further refinement of not everyone needs necessarily the same mandatory or statutory training. So how do we refine that, and how do we get the systems in place that allow us to do that? So very much look forward to receiving an update on that. Do we have any comments on that from our trade union colleagues or the Police Federation? Brian?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I appreciate that additional scrutiny. As you can imagine, we have a number of concerns about the backlog in training for officer safety training. So the fact that the board is looking at this and looking for a further review is welcomed by the SPF.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So that moves us on then to driver training, am I right, in terms of a verbal update?
Chair, I think Chief Super Alan Gibson's going to come in with that update.
Okay, Alan, thanks.
Morning, Chair. Morning, colleagues. Yeah, just to give you a quick verbal update in terms of driver training. So you maybe remember at the last committee meeting, I gave a fairly detailed position as to some of the challenges that we face to meet some of the driver training demands in the organisation. We've now taken a policy decision within the organisation that every ARV officer, every armed response vehicle officer will be trained to advanced driver training standards. That is really a very positive piece of news, but it does obviously bring additional challenge to make sure that we have a programme of training delivery for those officers and also the other ones that require that qualification within the driving environment. So I'm pleased to say the organisation has supported the employment of fixed-term contract driving instructors. I'm currently going through that recruitment process at the moment, and I would hope to come back to a future committee, should you wish me, Chair, to report on progress there. But it's a really positive step forward, so we can start to pull a plan together as to how we reduce the demand and actually give all the officers that need the advanced driving course that course as soon as is practicable. I met with the head of special services, Chief Superintendent Croft, just last week to start that plan and put the wheels in motion, so pardon the pun, so that we can actually hit the ground running once we have employed those fixed-term contract employees. And that, Chair, is my update on that item.
Okay, that's helpful. And would that also be swept into the overall report on, you say you're going to get a plan, so I think I think the committee is needing to know when this will come to an end and have an assurance that people who are needing that training are getting it and are not carrying out roles that they've not had the appropriate training for.
No, of course, Chair, we will happy to come back to you with some detail about what that looks like and when we'll meet the various timelines to make sure that everybody that needs the training gets the training. It will not be quick, to be frank, Chair. It will take some time. We're talking several hundred armed officers, so it's not going to be something we can do in a matter of weeks or months. It will take a period of time to work through it, but we'll do it in a risk-based approach, and we'll make sure that the training is done in the most appropriate manner, in the most effective means, and the most obviously efficient means to get to the point where we get 100% training completed. But I will come back with some detail on that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Tom?
Well, frankly, I commend that update and grateful for the progress. There's been a real focus on this, and I had the opportunity myself to be able to speak to Chief Superintendent Gibson's leadership team around the arrangements for this, and I know how challenging it is to get instructors at that level as well, so I'm very sympathetic. There was also the issue of broader the general police driver training and backlogs and officers in divisions who then were restricted in how they were able to drive police vehicles, and there was quite a backlog there. Is there any verbal update on that?
Chair, I'll come in if that's okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, there is still a backlog in that space, and obviously we will continue to try and drive that down. Again, pardon the pun, to drive that backlog down. It is an improving picture, Mr. Halpin, but it will take a little bit of time, along with advanced drivers, to get that down. But again, we're looking to try and be as efficient as we possibly can to do that. We're looking at other models of training as well, trying to make sure we maximise different locations around the country. We've even considered training in a different shift pattern if it will help make it more available and applicable to certain officers who might struggle to do certain shift patterns, etc. So we're looking at various different ways of doing it.
Would you be able to update that picture in the same update so that we've got a broader view of it?
100%. I think it would only be right that I gave you a rounded picture of all the driver training demands, so happy to do that.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you very much for that. We're moving on now to propose to close learning and development in terms of evidence of outcomes of mandatory and statutory training. People content to close that? Yep, okay. So workforce reports, it's being suggested that we keep that ongoing in terms of looking at nuances. Is that still being suggested in terms of we have that ongoing? Do we have any sense of when we would get that data? No, we can pick that up then at the ongoing workforce reports. We can perhaps have a better conversation about that. Forensic services, the people update, we've got suggestions that we're developing a plan for reporting so that we can see that within the committee work plan. So people content to close that? Okay. Sexism, equality, tackling misogyny. I wonder if we can wait until we have the paper and have the discussion about that in terms of before we agree to close. I'm just thoughtful of some of the outcome measures and when are we going to see the sharpness to that. So if people are content, we can wait till the paper. Surefire, in terms of health and safety, we're suggesting to close, but yet on the report, there's still what looks to me like quite a significant number of officers not receiving the appropriate protection. Am I misinterpreting that? Dawn.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. I've got some more update on that. There has been more progress in the last 3 weeks since the support has gone in. So as part of my report, I was going to update on that. Another intervention is that Op Moonbeam Gold has stood up in advance of that as well, and it is a significant priority for ACC mayors, who is leading on that to make sure that it's all in place for that.
Okay, let's keep that open until we have the health and safety report and we can see. So target operating model, anything? We're suggesting that this is ongoing and we'll get an update. Is there anything to update us on just now, Jack?
It was really just for some clarity around the work that's been going on so far and what we have plans and the timelines that we have, so that we could just have a conversation. We have actually taken the trade unions and the federations through the current operating model, so that is still open to anyone else who wants to see that, and we can talk through that. But we've had some really good and constructive conversations about that, and then how we're actually involving people to build the target state. Now, I know there was a commitment made at some point around having a one-pager, a draft to come to the committee, but that is obviously something that is under construction at the moment. But we do have the current operating model, which has now been signed off, which gives a lot of the detail that we're looking at and building on. So we are currently working across the entire organisation, that's corporate services as well as policing services, to look at the current state and the target state. And the date for the draft target state is October this year. That is all going to be aligned with the vision and the business plan that is under construction. So we're looking at pulling all of these things together to look at that in totality. So that's where we are at the moment, and that's the date we're heading for. But we are engaging with people across the organisation, lots of different levels. We're looking at detailed target operating models within local policing and public protection. So we are out speaking to officers, staff. We're also speaking to local commanders, so a variety of different ranks across staff and officer profiles. So a lot of engagement being done. We're also drawing on some of the reports that we've had over the last year from public protection and local policing. So we are drawing on, again, another variety of engagement that's happened across the organisation, but also with partners and public. So that's where we are just now, and the deadlines that we are aiming for, but I'm happy to take any specific questions on that just now.
Okay, thanks. Any comments or questions from members? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wonder if any actions that come up around target operating model, revised model of policing space, we might want to try and consolidate these if we can in the oversight group for the revised model of policing. And that's not to say that individual committees shouldn't see these pieces of work as they are completed, but it's just trying to keep track of it all kind of centrally and kind of maybe sort of tidy up the actions for people committee specifically.
So I was actually wondering if when the initial work on this was started, we were expecting more to come for scrutiny to people committee earlier than has actually happened. Not a criticism, but actually just the way things are moving. And I was wondering whether we close this now and the oversight board sends things to people to us when they're relevant. I'm looking at my board member colleagues trying to read the body language. Would you be content that we close this just now and we receive reports in due course rather than constantly have it as ongoing when there's nothing to tell us? Yep. Okay, so if we can do that, then that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. So I think that then takes us to decisions taken business and private items 7 to 9, which our standing orders allow us to do. Are people content that we take these items in private, with 9.1 being a members only discussion? So if we're agreeing to that, thank you. And then moving on to Katie in terms of the Wellbeing Action Plan and HMICS Frontline Focus Implementation Plan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the paper as read, but perhaps just to call out a couple of key points if I can. So this paper effectively seeks to pull together an independent review which was commissioned by P&D. So that's outlined in section 2.1. That was undertaken by a specialist organisation called ThriveWise, who came up with a number of recommendations themselves that are outlined in section 2.3. But it also then seeks to pull together the HMICS Wellbeing Inspection, which was obviously undertaken around the same time. And that in itself also has recommendations in 2.5. So it's really bringing together 2.3 and 2.5, bringing it together into a consolidated work plan. At 2.7, we talk about having looked at those recommendations and thinking about future state. The work that's being done then to develop the framework from which we kind of hang the action plan. And the framework talks about 3 lenses of health and well-being. So one is what we call undo, and that's around, when somebody has the effects of exposure to trauma, what do we do in the moment? The second lens is around mitigation. And then the third lens is around prevention. So we'll start to see in the action plan that's outlined in Appendix 1 that we've tried to colour code each of the actions against those 3 lenses so that we can start to look at proportionality, but it also helps us then to look at evidence-based assessments in how well we're doing or not. So 2.11 talks about some of the dependencies. I guess the key dependency that I'm going to call out is that whilst P&D own the development of this work, we need the organisation to get behind in terms of confidence, to have good, honest conversations around well-being, to remove stigma, etc. So I think that's probably one of the biggest cultural dependencies that we have in successfully landing this. The only other thing that I would perhaps call out, if I can, and hopefully it will be of interest to committee members, is within the section where we start to talk about evaluation, we've really started to push our thinking around that evidence-based outcome, which I know that the chair and other members have rightly been pushing us on. And in particular, I will talk about a framework that we outline in the appendix, which is around an assessment framework that's the Blue Light Wellbeing Framework. So it was developed by the National Police Wellbeing Service. And actually, that's a framework now that we're going to take forward that will really help us to give that evidence-based assessment. In addition, we're bringing on Kirkpatrick model to evaluate learning so that we can really start to look at the different levels of evaluation and hopefully ultimately that behavioural change, the cultural change. And we're also revisiting the Royal Foundation and Blue Light Together approach to a wellbeing assessment. So this is an assessment that they have around policy, practice and learning. So hopefully it will give some assurance and comfort to members that we really are focusing very much more on that evidence-based outcome. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Katie, that's very, very helpful and good to see the real progress that's been made in this area. Katrina.
Thank you. Yes, I read this with a lot of interest. I think that I've got a few small questions or comments, but I think the biggest one or the key one for me really is it's really interesting. And obviously I've just come back to the People Committee after a couple of years, so I'm kind of coming back in a bit new to this, I suppose, in some ways. So, and obviously there's been a lot of progress being made in this area. The issue around trauma, I did a wee bit of research around trauma for the purposes of this meeting. And in terms of addressing trauma, there are 5 key areas that are required to be put in place to support people recovering from trauma. And these 5 things are safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. So my big question really is, in what way does all this work intersect with the work on policing together and the sex and misogyny and the EDI work? Because it seems to me that if people don't feel safe and that they can trust their colleagues and that they have, the impact that they don't feel empowered, how then do traumatic events impact on them? Is there any overlap? Not overlap. Is there any cross-referencing in that area? Katie, I'm sure you understand what I can see you sort of nodding there. So I think you understand what I'm saying. So I'd like to hear some more around that, if possible. There's a point in 2.5, and I'm not sure that I really kind of could make sense of it. So recommendation 2 was address organisational stressors, yes, including those caused by perceived unfairness in application of process and procedures. And I didn't quite make sense of what that was referring to, if you wouldn't mind expanding on that for me. I think that there's something else, sorry, Chair, I know I'm taking a bit time here. Yeah, no, I just wanted to, so in terms of ill health retrial and injury on duty processes, sorry, all key competencies required to be a police officer permanently affected. The officer was permanently unfit for regular employment. My question is that within Police Scotland, or is that in terms of entirely? So that was just a point of clarification, please. I mean, obviously, the the fast tracking of those processes, that's really good. You know, you've obviously improved a great deal, and presumably on a continuing trajectory. The ill health retirement, sorry, the injured on duty figures weren't looking quite so positive. So I wondered if you could kind of comment a bit more on that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions. Can I take your middle question first, if I can, around 2.5? So this was the HMICS recommendation 2. I think when we look at the application of processes and procedures, it's I suppose the lenses of culture, isn't it? The express bit about your process might be fit for purpose, but then it's that lived experience of how that's applied, what the lived experiences of colleagues. And I suppose 2 areas that we would focus on would be grievance and promotions are probably the 2 that are cited. So we have separate work streams underway. We've just held a second promotions workshop actually with a number of stakeholders, really to get into what is it that we're seeing and hearing of evidence, insights, etc. So I think that those are probably the 2 that are forefront of my mind at the moment. I think on the interconnectedness, if there's such a word as that, I completely agree. I mean, when we present papers like this, it's challenging not just to be thinking about health and well-being, but be thinking about kind of strategic intent and never looking at isolation of the different pieces that P&D or any of our colleagues do. So I always come back to the people strategy, which actually is the intent of the organisation around what it is that we're going to do for our people over the next 3 years, and how health and well-being connects to leadership development, that connects to good conversations, that connects to etc. So completely take your point on board. When we look at a plan such as this, we look not only at kind of health and well-being, but kind of vertical pieces that might already be underway, so policing together, etc., and try and incorporate them into mainstreaming. So when the people partners, which actually are kind of front-facing part of P&D, they have implementation plans for each division. And within that, you'll start to see how all of this comes together into one plan that effectively is the deliverables out to divisions. I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but
yeah, no, really helpful. Thank you very much. I suppose, as quite often is the case, I think sometimes then, I mean, this is quite a big paper and you're covering a lot of ground here, and I understand that, and you do mention, you know, making sure that there's a link with other work streams like the policing together and so on, but it just might just have been a good thing to kind of maybe be more explicit about that, but that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then just on the ill health retirement, so that is written in pension regulations. So that's laid out in terms of our approach to do that and our process and the criteria.
So it was the injury on duty, actually. Sorry, I maybe wasn't clear about that. That was the one that I was kind of more concerned about.
Same. So within regulations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you
very much for that, Paul.
Yeah, 10 recommendations, but I don't see any timetable for delivery of those. Can you give us any indication at this stage?
Within the appendix, we know that we've got a piece of work to do to come back with some timelines on that. I think the first step for us was to hopefully get approval on direction of travel around the framework, the intended action plan, and then certainly we will put timelines, but actually an additional piece to that is the evidence-based measures that you would expect to see on that coming through on the dashboard.
So when do you think you'll be able to give us timelines?
We'd be able to come back to next people committee with the timelines and the evidence metrics.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then just one question from me, Katie. Resourcing all of this, are you confident that the resources are going to be there for implementation?
There's 2 aspects to that. There's resources within people in development and the health and wellbeing team, and we call that out as a dependency in section 2.11. So as things stand at the moment, we don't have enough resources within that team. but part of the proposed restructure of P&D, which we would hopefully move into consultation on at a point in the coming weeks, that's to look to put more resources into health and wellbeing. In addition to that, I think the challenge is around organisational capacity, and whether that's capacity to have health and wellbeing at the front and foremost of people's thinking, but also perhaps capacity to engage in capability development. So whether that's formal training, one-to-ones, etc. I think there are risks in dependencies, yes.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Deb Spears, have you anything to add about the importance of this and how the operational frontline will be able to prioritise the wellbeing piece?
I think Katie summarised it fairly well. I think the assurance that I would probably provide to you, Chair, is that it's at the forefront of much of our thinking as we develop our vision for 2013. Right at the heart of that is about a thriving workforce. I personally chair our wellbeing oversight group. And it's a standing agenda item at the People Board. So I think we are working really hard and ensuring that it is a priority in this space, and that position really won't change in the short to medium term.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Anything from Police Federation or Unison on this? Any comments, David?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to raise just a couple of comments on reading that. I think also that we should be capturing concerns about trauma that's not just caused in the workplace for members. I think a lot of people do come to work and then after time experience that there's been trauma in their life in their past and that hasn't been dealt with, and I think that we should be helping people through with that. I've certainly experienced that with members where perhaps dealing with an incident triggers something from their past and history or childhood or trauma or something like that. And that's certainly something we should be keeping a thought and a focus on. I did reflect on the part in there about occupational health. When members' experiences, it's very difficult to get to occupational health. They only seem to get referred to occupational health when a manager wants to do that. I've had members who very much have been challenged trying to get to occupational health when they request it. So it's welcome that we have a look to review on that. I just wanted to make one observation, which might just be me personally, but I was a bit thrown when you used the word thrive, just because in policing thrive means something else. It's a process that we use, and I just thought it might just be better to find another word there, but that might just be me, and I was maybe overthinking that actual point, but that's just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
No, David, that's very, very helpful. And certainly I'll just check with Katie. My understanding is the whole trauma piece. You're absolutely right. It's rarely one or the, I mean, sometimes it can be exclusively work related, but actually my understanding is, and I'm going to ask Katie if that the whole trauma piece is to support people in their whole life, not just the one aspect. Would be helpful to have confirmation that self-referral to occupational health is supported, and I didn't notice the Thrive connection, but when you've highlighted it, I completely understand, but perhaps leave that to the operational team to deal with it. Katie, the self-referral and the whole person support for trauma?
Yes, so definitely the whole person. We don't make a distinction in terms of both EAP and employee assistance program and occupational health, whether it's work related or outside of work. And rightly, life's complex, and the two things are not always distinct. What we're seeing on employee assistance is within the top 3 reasons for colleagues engaging in the service in the last 6 weeks. Is that the third main reason actually is family difficulties or family issues. So we definitely don't make a distinction. I think if there are issues on self-referral or referral, I'd obviously welcome Unison to come forward and talk about any specifics. I've stood up, we have somebody who now is responsible for the contract management of both EAP and OC Health, and that actually will be a standing agenda item on the P&D leadership team meeting, so that we can look at that, and we're quite happy to share that in JNCC with trade unions so they can see the performance of the contract.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Katrina, if I may, if I can bring Brian in for comment and then bring yourself in, if that's all right, Brian.
Yes, thanks, Chair. From an SPF perspective, we've gone a long way, haven't we, from the first meeting back in Glasgow that we both sat in with our colleagues from Lifelines. So we're moving in the right direction. There's an awful lot of discussion and papers being presented, but it now has to get out there to the front line because they're not aware of what we're doing in the background. I'm not criticising what's been done. I'm just saying we have to get greater awareness to the wider membership. And we have to be cognizant that we all know that with our reducing the front line because of budgetary constraints, that will have a greater impact on those who are left in the front line because those numbers will become smaller. So there's more activity likely to may actually impact on their well-being and welfare.
Yeah, so
but we applaud what's been done. Just need to get it over the line now. Thank you, Chair.
That's a helpful comment. Thanks, Brian. Katrina.
Yeah, so yes, I really, it was more a comment that was sort of triggered there about it's very hard to distinguish work-related trauma and issues at home because, as we know, trauma doesn't just impact on the individual, it impacts on all the people that are close to them as well. So I'm sorry, it was just a comment.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So if I may move on then and hand over to Vicky in terms of forensics. But thank you very much indeed for that, Katie. I mean, I'd like to echo Brian's comments that there's been a huge amount of work and it's helpful to see, and we'll look forward to continuing to move and get evidence of the effectiveness and outcomes. So thank you for that. Vicky.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'll take the paper as read and highlight just some key points for everyone. So this proposal in terms of reporting to the from Forensic Services to the People Committee has been developed through discussions with SPA, with Police Scotland, P&D in particular, and Health and Safety. And really it just outlines the fact that there's a proposal here that's been put forward which builds on the services back arrangements that are in place for forensic services, where P&D and Health and Safety provide data recording and reporting. So if I refer to section 2.3 of the paper, just to put a bit of context here, forensic services, we're just over around 600 people across forensic services. So they're smaller than most divisions within Police Scotland. But we recognise the importance of both proportionality, but also providing, of course, the People Committee with assurance on people-related matters and allow that level of scrutiny. So 2.3 proposes that we consider the following, that workforce monitoring data, and that we work together with colleagues in Police Scotland, and we will ensure that forensic services insights and related matters are included in that reporting, which is provided obviously by Police Scotland, and also similar with health and safety reporting as well. So incorporate forensic services specific issues and insights into the Police Scotland reports. But also it's proposed that we have exception reporting too, whereby if there are specific papers which are relevant to the People Committee, that will of course include those as submissions. Also outlined in section 2.4 of the paper is a proposal whereby we would look at the People Committee work plan, and it's suggested here that we have on that work plan some specific reports from forensic services. The first timescales are around about the Q4 of this financial year, looking at the Forensic Services Inclusivity Programme, which is our version, if you like, of Police Scotland's Policing Together. Around the Q1 of 25-26, a paper on our Strategic Workforce Plan, which is currently ongoing. And then an annual report around August time each year, which really brings together a number of factors and considerations, and that overall picture on people-related matters across forensic services. It's important, obviously, that the reports themselves look at output measures of success, as we've discussed previously, and we absolutely will link these into our strategic people-related outcomes and objectives. So essentially, that's the main points of the paper, and more than happy to take questions and considerations.
Vicky, thanks very much. Indeed, it's good to see this coming forward since we first agreed that we would see people-related data coming to the People Committee. Paul?
Yeah, I think this is a very sensible and well-balanced approach to it. Is this going to happen from here on in, is my question.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul. There's still work ongoing that's required in terms of ensuring that we have the right level of reporting within the Police Scotland report. So that work has just started, to be honest, and I think it aligns back to one of the actions that we've discussed earlier on the workforce reports. So I would hope we would be in a position for the next committee, but I absolutely need to engage with colleagues around the timescales there.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from Tom?
Thanks. I agree this is a very helpful approach and common sense as well. You're quite explicit in the report, Vicky, that the inclusivity programme for forensic services is different from Policing Together programme, but the principles and priorities will be the same. I've no doubt, and I acknowledge that, but it's just this reassurance around its level of priority, because as you be aware, attending the Policing Together programme, forensic services understand the importance of that.
Thanks for the question and the comments there, Tom. Yeah, absolutely agree. As a priority, it sits there on our forensic services strategy. It sits there absolutely in our business plan for the next 2 years. Number one, in terms of that around our inclusivity programme and making sure that is driven forward across the organisation. So yes, it is a priority.
Okay. Any comments from our trade union colleagues or Federation? David?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just wanted to make a comment that looking through the paper, I don't see any link into TUs and the representation of staff, how that will be engaged. It's perhaps covered in the governance framework that's referred to in the paper. However, the hyperlinks in the paper are all, they all go to an internal website for SPA, which, you know, these are publicly published papers, so it doesn't allow people to link through to what that information would actually be. But I don't feel it sort of captures where it goes into the trade unions or the staff giants EC, if that's where it needs to be. With this information, it doesn't seem to touch on that at all.
Okay, that's a very, very helpful comment, and clearly, as a matter of principle, but also as our commitment to fair work, then employee and staff voice is incredibly important, and it's always, I think probably I would say it's essential for things that come to People Committee, that it's been worked up in partnership with the statutory police associations and the trade unions. Vicky, can you give us some comments, please, on your process for working in partnership with the trade unions?
Yes, absolutely. And what I just call out, yes, absolutely, David, that's an oversight, and it's I suppose expected that there will obviously be that trade union engagement, and with diversity staff associations where relevant as well throughout these processes and people related matters. Apologies again for the links, that they were internal and not external facing, so that the paper can be updated to reflect those. In terms of TU engagement, yes, as Fiona's outlined there, fair work, etc., explicitly details the requirements there. We have set up an internal collaborative subgroup of the JNCC, which is just commencing, is absolutely at that stage of developing the terms of reference for that. And yes, there will be that early intervention piece, that early engagement piece, I think is really, really important with our trade union colleagues. So we will ensure that is taken forward. And apologies for the errors there.
The trade unions fully involved in the subgroup and creation of terms of reference?
Yes, absolutely. So the first meeting has taken place, and there were no terms of reference provided to that meeting for discussion. It was very much a let's take this forward. John McLean was there at the meeting as well. So it's very much a collaborative approach to the development of those terms and reference.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, in light of the work I'm doing in Fair Work, that I'm leading on the development of the terms of reference with forensics and trade unions, and will be supporting the chairing of the subgroup.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Right, I'm going to move on now, and I think we're with ACC Houston on the HMICS review of culture.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I obviously spoke at the last People Committee in relation to the work that was going on to answer the HMICS review of culture. And the paper that's obviously today outlined the improvement plan that is quite a lengthy document at the back at Appendix A, which details each of the 11 recommendations. Probably a few bits I'd like to pull out from this is the fact that this is quite a cross-cutting review and goes across different business areas within Police Scotland, and I've seen input from my own area of professionalism insurance, Policing Together, change programme, training, and also into wider P&D under Director Miller. So it's been a real opportunity to try and pull this together into the improvement plan that it is today, and it's some of those interdependencies across the different business areas is why it has taken some time to pull together. There is a few developments that are ongoing that I think will assist with this, and it's probably good to point out the staff survey has just closed and is going to create a huge part of some of the recommendations within the improvement plan and how we can shape that going forward. There's been quite a lot of engagement workshops with HMICS with this during the course of the last few months to make sure that we are reaching the right standard in relation to what we've put in the plan. So that's been really important. And there is quite a great opportunity here for a lot of benchmarking, as there's a lot of significant similar work taking place across UK policing. The NPCC are leading on a cultural toolkit, which we've been able to link in with, as well as some work with the Metropolitan Police in relation to their cultural diversity and inclusion programme. So really good to sort of benchmark against that and seek some good practice and other ideas. And the final bit I really probably touch on is the governance structure that's been put in place for this. Although it is across a number of different areas within the organisation, ACC Policing Together, Katrina Payton will sit as the leading the group on this, and all our different areas will feed into that to ensure that we're keeping up to date with the improvement plan. There is a lot in that. I don't intend to get into all the recommendations in great depth. You can see that there is a significant amount of work that's been put in already, with some sort of real challenging timescales to try and meet that as well. But what I would say, the Policing Together strategic outcomes, it sits very well with a number of the recommendations, and that will again assist us in shaping that going forward about how we change them as we develop. So happy to take any questions on anything that I've covered so far.
Thank you very much. It's good to see this very important piece of work coming together. Members, any questions or comments? No. Good, fulsome paper. Tom, then Katrina.
Thanks very much. In the paper, Stuart, it references the approach being made to Metropolitan Police Service regarding their programme in terms of approaching to cultural diversity and inclusion. Has that, have you any sense of that moving forward in terms of the learning there being considered and brought in?
So one of the things that they're doing is in relation to cultural dashboards, which is something that we've also been working with Tom McMahon's team on developing. So I think there's a good bit to take from there. They're probably quite an early stage as well in some of the work they've been doing. But I think size and scale, it'd be really good to sort of keep in line with that and benchmark as we progress our part of the plan as well, because there is real crossovers there, particularly with the dashboard approach.
The benchmarking in particular would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. Thank you.
Gina?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm very, very interested in the Tom McMahon's work going forward. It's been quite a journey over the years. It's a request, please. I enjoyed reading the bulk of the report. It's really interesting. It looks very positive. When I'm trying to read the appendix, I have a visual processing syndrome, so I have to have all my papers printed off, and there's absolutely no way I could read that. So in future, could you please ensure, sorry, it sounds like a terrible whinge, but it's actually quite important because I couldn't access the information in these sheets. Just in future, if you could ensure that any text in a report is of a reasonable scale so that it's actually accessible by people like me.
Katrina, that's really helpful for you to raise. I wonder if you could work with Debs, because this is probably not exclusive to this paper. I wonder if Debs, can we get that sorted, please, so that we know and understand what the specifications are for all of our board members. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Just one question from me before I invite others to make a comment. ECC Houston, the benchmarking with the MAID, are there other services that you can benchmark against?
I think that's something that we're looking at as well. I mentioned there about some of the NPCC work that's ongoing in relation to culture, and I know that Lincolnshire Police have actually been doing a leading bit of work in this, although quite small and relative to the size of Police Scotland. I think there is other opportunities, particularly through the work with the NPCC organisational culture questionnaire. Some of the findings that's going to come out of that will be nationally shared, so I think it would be really good to tap into that going forward. Okay,
that's helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Anything from the trade unions or the Police Federation, David?
Thanks, Chair. It's just an observation that I don't feel that the paper really captures key stakeholders, you know, whether it be trade unions representing the staff voice or the Federation, and the structure or in the considerations. I don't feel it recognises really Fair Work and the voice of staff throughout that, so I just wanted to make that observation, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. So the question then from me, Stuart, and it might be to Kat, but for you at the moment, is that engagement of the workforce voice, the Federation ASPS, Unison Unite, and how that's been taken forwards?
Yeah, I think in part of the recommendations, each of the recommendations have quite different owners who are going to feed back into the oversight group that will be run by ACC Payton. I think there'll be really plenty of opportunities for us to engage with stakeholders, particularly from my own area. If I speak about that, first of all, some of my vetting work crosses into this in response to the HMICS review of vetting. There's a real opportunity for us to engage with stakeholders once we move that forward. And also the training, the syllabus for probationers, that's something where I'd like to see my own groups that will be dealing with this linking in, particularly with the Federation, Unison and ASP. So I do think this is probably a high-level document at the moment to say how we're approaching these recommendations, and to sort of give some reassurance to David and others. There will be that opportunity to engage with them a bit closer when we get into the sort of smaller, tighter groups about how we're going to develop our own areas.
And maybe the concept of co-production might be considered rather than just developing and consulting. But I know that it's a journey, and that gradual shift in culture of fair work, making sure that the employee and workforce voice is included in shaping, not just in looking at a paper and saying yes or no. It's good to have early engagement or early involvement. So thank you for that. Okay, that's helpful. I'm going to move on now to sexism, equality, tackling misogyny, and we have Chief Superintendent Emerson.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Chair. So there's maybe been a little bit of confusion around the paper because the title maybe doesn't do justice to what's covered within it. So it's not specific to the SEPTIM update, it's more broad in terms of the policing together piece, but I'll try to touch on the sexism and tackling misogyny as well. So just some kind of key highlights from the paper, which obviously outlines the refresh of the policing together vision, 4 pillars, the governance and engagement approach that we're taking. It was seen as an opportunity at the midway point in terms of the delivery of the strategy and also the merger of policing together division as was and PPCW really just to have a look again at whether we were on the right track and consider if there were any adjustments that we wanted to make. So in terms of the governance refresh, the drivers have really been around streamlining and trying to make sure that we're fully aligned to the SPA, placing together governance approaches. We've looked to change the tasking group to kind of focus on the performance and impact aspect even more. So that's really enhanced focus on the deliverables, and also making sure that we link activity into the local policing divisions, which has sometimes been a bit of a challenge, especially given the size of our team, which is something that we're working on. Sexism and tackling misogyny has now actually been brought under our wider Policing Together governance umbrella, as opposed to operating separately, which is hopefully a positive and should allow us to enhance our collaboration whilst reducing the kind of duplication that might exist across the work streams. And that's probably one of the key challenges for myself coming into post, is just to look at how we maximise the resource that we have, given how busy this landscape is. In terms of the vision and pillars, I think we all felt it was really important that we linked and clearly articulated how what we're doing internally as an organisation impacts externally from that public confidence, trust and service delivery perspective. We've really just tried to simplify the language and wordiness of that vision and add in that external service delivery aspect. In terms of the pillars, we've not taken away from anything that was already there within the original pillars, but we have merged a couple. So we've now got a learning pillar, or that's the proposed pillar, as opposed to the training and prevention pillar. So effectively combines those and very much tries to focus on, okay, it's all very well to train people, but what learning have we actually taken from it? We've added a communities pillar, which covers that external facing aspect, which I've just described. And then for the communication one, that was very much focused on the internal comms piece. We've just tried to extend that to look at the external aspect, and that will take into consideration our communication and engagement strategy moving forward. Just out of interest for this group, and might pick up some of what was just discussed in ACC Houston's update there around the cultural improvement piece, we've obviously got the collaboration group, which is co-chaired by Nikki and ACC Peyton, and has that representation from all of the diversity staff associations, the unions and the Federation and ASPs. So we're really trying to enhance what we're doing in that space to better coordinate the activities that are ongoing, because there's obviously lots of good work and plans that the diversity staff associations have ongoing. So we really want to try and connect the two as much as we possibly can, and really collaborate as much in this space as possible. So hopefully that will be a positive and is something that can be used by some of the other linked activities moving forward. In terms of the external piece, the focus remains very much on our Black and African communities and the LGBTQI+ communities, and we've got a plan in place to try and enhance that as much as possible. I think it was also reported at the last meeting, but Kevin Ditcham from the strategy and engagement team has now started in his new role with us. So that's a real positive, and we're really again trying to connect what we're doing. We've also been successful in funding for some community engagement coordinators who'll work across the various protected characteristics. So another real positive. So we're really hoping to get into the space of having a clear strategy, a stakeholder map, and then a clear action plan coming out of that. So that's kind of the highlights from the paper. I know there's a bit of an interest around the cultural dashboard and how that's going to support the work moving forward. We're not in a position to present that yet, and obviously there's nobody from that team here in the meeting today due to other commitments, but there is really good progress that I just want to try and reassure the board. We've got a lot of workshop activity ongoing currently to really try to look at where we baseline, where we were with the last staff survey, etc., and other measures, and how we really drive that forward to get as good engagement and insight as we possibly can. But happy to take any questions.
Okay, that's grand. Thanks very much for that. Looking to my board member colleagues to see if they have any questions. Katrina?
Thank you. And actually really appreciated your verbal report just now. That really clarified a few things for me that I had some kind of notes around the paper. I'm really pleased to see that the misogyny and sexism has been pulled into this work, because I couldn't understand in the first place why it wasn't from the get-go. So that's great. That's really, really positive. I think my main question, you kind of answered my question, I suppose. I guess when I look at things like this, when I read a report like this and I see, there's very much a focus on African Black communities, the minoritized communities and LGBTQ plus, I kind of think, well, should it not be all the protected characteristics? But you have addressed that in your commentary there. Another question would be around how you get that community stakeholder conversation going on. But again, you've talked about that, which is great. And I only have one other little comment, and it's just, again, it's going to sound a bit like it's not really. I have some issues around only ever using the term Operation Tarn, because there was a young man at the centre of that, and I just think sometimes that it would be, we should use the name, we should say Sheikh Kubayo rather than just Operation Tarn. But that's just sorry, that's just me being a bit whatever. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave the naming as an operational issue in terms of our Scotland colleagues, I think. But thanks for that, Katrina. Can I just check, you talked about a lot of engagement. Does that include the trade unions and the Police Federation and the ASPs? Are they fully involved in all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So that collaboration group that I've just described, we've really tried to reinvigorate. I know Nikki's on the call as well, and I'll hopefully support that. I've only been in post for about 6 weeks, but I was at one of the meetings that we had in my first week, and I think it was really positive. We tried to kind of clear anything that needed to be aired, give people the opportunity to really look at how we make that more positive moving forward. Accepting that everybody has their own activity going on. It kind of ties into Katrina's point there, but we need to look at that intersectionality and how we make best use of resources and really kind of step up in that space. So I think there's still work to be done, but it will hopefully provide a really good platform for policing together, but also some of the linked reviews and inspections and things that are going on to make sure that we are kind of getting into that co-design space that you talked about earlier.
Okay, that's grand. Thanks very much indeed. Any comments from trade unions or Federation? David?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's an observation that was similar to what your question was in terms of engagement with stakeholders. Again, it's the Policing Together map. I'm not clear on where the stakeholders are on that. I just wanted to make the point that Unison does have a Black Members Officer, an LGBT plus officer, a disability officer, an equalities officer. We do have people within my branch, which the Unison Police Staff Scotland branch, that actually, they specialise in that particular area. My observation is that there's a focus quite often on the non-statutory staff associations, because they will have the one characteristic is that that they lead on, but we actually do have that. And again, that's speaking to the staff voice and the fair work part. That more involvement there would definitely be appreciated. Rather than just the collaborative group where one member, someone like myself, will go along to sort of observe and comment. There are opportunities there. I have offered those opportunities out back in April to Policing Together, but have had no response to that. But I do think that there is a better way to engage with the experience that Unison has and the members that we have that can speak to these issues.
Okay, David, that's really, really helpful, and I'm sure that'll be taken on board. And thank you very much for offering that additional resource and wisdom and experience that Unison have. Okay, I'm going to move on then to Katie with the staff voice.
So, Chat, I'm actually going to say this isn't my paper. It's
apologies.
Director Tom McMillan is leading.
Okay. Do we have anyone to speak to the paper then?
Chair, apologies, my hand's up. I'm just checking with Tom just now in that paper. I don't know if you'd be content to move on to the next agenda item and come back, and I'll quickly try and get an answer to that.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're still with you then, Katie, in terms of creating a positive workplace.
Thank you, Chair. You've caught me off guard there. So in terms of creating a positive workplace, so this paper is really talking about grievance and resolving of workplace issues. So what key points that I'd pull out for this, one is around a mediation service. So we've stood up and strengthened mediation capability and capacity within the organisation with a number of trained mediators now. And what we're seeing in there since we've really stood that up is a 30% uptake in the request for mediation. The requests have gone from a starting point, given that this is still quite in its infancy, but of 5 requests to 16 requests so far within an annual period. We're seeing about a 50% resolution at that mediation stage. So we know there's more for us to do, but foundationally, I think we've got a good start point there. The other piece that I'd call out is that we know that we've had issues around some of the timelines in relation to either hearing grievances or indeed investigating disciplinaries. And we've had funding approved for some additional fixed term resource to come in and supplement experienced people to supplement some of the capacity in that space so that we can start to drive those timelines. The third piece that I'd pull out is in section 2.3.2, which is the revised policy. So we thank the trade unions and staff associations for their help with this, but this effectively now represents a new policy which went live on the 22nd of July. And 2.3.2 calls out the key changes within that policy. I am very, very conscious of the fact that one part of this is agreeing a new policy or procedure, but actually the biggest part for us as an organisation is how we implement it, embed it, bring it to life and the lived experience of colleagues. So there's an implementation group that's been stood up, and Appendix B fleshes out some of the implementation plan. And then the last bit that I'd call out is that we've launched a people management development programme. So if your leadership matters is about the kind of the values and ethos of leadership in Police Scotland, the people management development programme is very much that kind of nuts and bolts. How do I have a conversation about absence? How do I manage absence? How do I support colleagues, etc.? And what I would say is that so far the numbers have shifted slightly since this paper was written, but 844 first line managers have now completed this programme, with 72% of attendees reporting they now feel more confident and competent to undertake their role as a line manager. 84% would recommend this course to a colleague, and 88% saying that they now feel more confident in applying the skills, knowledge and understanding that they've gained on that programme in their workplace and in their role. So we're seeing really good evidence feedback on that. So we continue to do that and to roll that out, and that will become one of our foundational training packages for line managers. So but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
That's very helpful, Katie. Thanks for that, and good again to see real progress in something that is really welcome. Members, comments or questions? Katrina, then Tom.
Yeah, this very, very positive paper and really interesting. I think looking at Appendix A, the grievance trends, I guess one of the things that comes to my mind is, 100 grievance cases in a year from an organisation the size of Police Scotland isn't huge, is it really? I mean, it's 100 too many probably, but it's not huge. But I'm wondering what these numbers represent in terms of the number of people experiencing some of these issues that actually don't get to the point where they take it to a grievance. And that's obviously an unanswerable question, but it is a question that's in my mind, because as it says here, obviously the stress associated with the formal grievance process is huge, so people won't do it lightly and my comment was then the main theme of grievances submitted were EDI related in terms of disability discrimination, unsupported in terms of the reasonable adjustments and all this. So I'm very, very pleased to see that, you know, what's being done to address that in terms of rolling out, you know, training and guidance in terms of reasonable adjustments, because it is a really difficult topic. I know that from other work that I've done outside the SPA. So yeah, that was it really. Thank you.
Okay, and maybe a bit of reflection, Katie, on how we make sure, so 100's not a lot, so how do we make sure that either we have the early resolution or people who want to come forwards can do that, but we will leave that with you at the moment. Tom?
So I'm hugely encouraged by the emphasis on mediation, and any of us have any experiences in the legal committee, for instance, will understand how important that is. So there's 2 points in that, Katie. But one is mediation, the importance of it being truly independent and trusting and fair, and you know, I suppose the big question there is there external oversight of that to ensure that part of it, to maintain its integrity, i.e. I know external mediation services would have external accreditation, for instance, would be one area to reassure that. So just some sort of comment to reassurance around that issue. And the second point is your report refers to the grievance lived experience survey. And is that survey available, the results, as opposed to reference to it? Have we got that in detail? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So the lived experience, the grievance, I think that's been reported to committee previously, but I need to check. It came under the tackling misogyny work stream. So I'm pretty sure it has been, but perhaps we can get committee services just to double check.
I can go back and reference that. Thank you, if that's
Yeah,
the case.
Thank you. So on mediation, this is the tricky part, isn't it? It's trust in the process, and it's a big cultural shift from falling back on formal process and procedure policy to actually stepping into a space where you know, you can feel more vulnerable. I guess is the reality. We've stepped up. So when we stood up the trained network, I think we're up to 25 mediators now. We actually engaged an external organisation to deliver that accredited training, and there was an assessment at the end of the training. I know that because I went through it myself. And we now have within the network, we have ongoing meetings with the networks where they will share some of the best practice, some of their learning. So it's that kind of CPD piece. In addition to which, we have somebody that oversees mediation across the organisation, so a kind of a go-to person. I think on the independence, we've really made clear that actually when a request for mediation comes in, we have a process by which it's allocated so that we're making sure there is that independence. It's always going to be a struggle, I think, you know, for people to trust in that, and we have to work hard to make sure that, you know, we can grow that trust. If we have a situation of mediation where we do not believe we can be impartial or independent, then we would fall back on an external provider, and we would bring that in, and we have done that.
Thanks. That's reassured. I suppose the fact that I asked the question, it's a real important, it's explicit when it's out there.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any comments from the trade unions or the Police Federation, David?
Thanks very much, Chair. A few observations on this from me. We have been attending the grievance workplace group and been engaged with this the process. Obviously, it's too early yet to know about its effectiveness, but it is welcome. We know that historically a lot of grievances have been about workplace relationships that break down, and a grievance just doesn't resolve that at all, and that mediation is the process to do that. So it's very welcome, and I'm hopeful we'll see some outcomes from that. As everyone knows, being in the trade union, you don't tend to hear the good stories. People tend to come to you with the bad stories. So, you know, it's difficult for us to get sight of that. And I have told the group that, you know, not many people are probably going to phone me and tell me how they've just had a great mediation. But I am hopeful, because it definitely is the way to go. I'd like to comment a little bit on the grievance trends. I would see that under that part of the paper, to me, that was a lot of tribunals, and that there's 9 cases closed. I would reflect if those are settlements, then that's a concern that we're not really seeing what the outcomes of those are or the reasons for those and the learning from that. I think sometimes settlement hides that really from plain sight. And I welcome the acknowledgement about reasonable adjustments. I would say that that is a huge frustration for members. I'm often speaking to staff who come to me saying, I've been given a 6-week phased return, rehabilitative return, and my boss says I can only have 3 weeks, and things like that. And it's very, very difficult, or we can't get the chair or the desk or the things that people need, and it becomes a stalemate. So I really welcome that that's been acknowledged and being actioned and looked into, because I think we really need to resolve that.
Okay, thanks, David. Katie's going to respond, which saves me from turning that into a question, I think.
Okay, I was just going to focus actually on the reasonable adjustments. It's definitely an area of challenge, not just for us, but for other organisations. Some of the team recently met with the Department of Work and Pensions, and I think the figure quoted was a 42% uplift. It was there or thereabouts in their workload of requests coming through. So what that means for us, obviously, is some timing issues. In terms of them being able to turn it around, but also then the impact that that has on colleagues who are kind of left waiting, and obviously that sits with us as an organisation, but then also our ability to be able to respond once we get that back in. We have had approval for an uplift in resource to help within P&D, so I think it was an additional 3 resource we've mapped out just to manage the circa 40% uplift that we've experienced within our own team.
Okay, thanks for that. That's helpful. DCC Spears, anything on Tom, or are we going to take the paper noted rather than for discussion?
I don't have an update, Chair, but if I do get one before we finish the public session, I'll come back to you and try to chase them down.
That's fine. I think the paper was fairly straightforward, so that's fine. Katie, still with you on Fair Work?
Thank you, Chair. It's with me, but it's not with me because I'm actually going to pass this to one of our team members. So this effectively follows the Fair Work assessment in May 2023 and provides an update. 2 key areas that came out from that assessment were around areas of development and then the commitment for an annual assessment. So John McLean, who substantively is a member of SPA team, is on secondment at the moment to P&D and is leading this work. So I'm going to pass to John if I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to summarise very quickly, we had an annual assessment we did in collaboration with trade unions and statutory staff associations last year, where the main focus was on how do we identify areas for development that can then help embed Fair Work into everything we do, but also recognise what this committee has consistently recognised since I've been involved in it, around about the importance of measurement, data and insight to be able to demonstrate the extent to which all the activity is having the impact in terms of fair work. So this second annual update focuses more on recognition that took place before the strategies were developed and the implementation plans were developed, and shows that the timing of that work allowed for fair work to be embedded in the delivery plans for the strategic workforce plan and people strategy, so that when you see those implement, that will help us identify the extent to which fair work has been further embedded and delivered into policing through the strategies. So putting that to one side, there's more of a deep dive focus on collective voice, which has come up regularly throughout each item today, and a couple of other areas. So some of the work that we've been doing in the last few months has been primarily around about the staff JNCC and how we basically ensure an effective approach to escalation and finding that ability to agree and disagree in a systematic way that helps the organisation move forward and the voice feels heard. The other key focus, which primarily has been driven by Katie around about organisational change to the procedure, is early engagement. And you've talked about that today, Chair, as well, in terms of ensuring co-design and early engagement. And that's certainly a key part of the work that's been progressed right now across the organisation. I do want to make a link into the culture review, not necessarily the recommendations, but the fact that a lot of this relates to culture, and there was reference within the review around about the kind of culture of collaboration, a supportive environment that welcomes challenge, and how that will feed into effective collective voice going forward. So there's a complete connection between the work around about culture and fair work. And I know that the paper can be taken as read, but just to quickly call out that the annual assessment did have was a key source for actually pay negotiations into the rest of the year, where issues that were highlighted through engagement with statutory staff associations then fed into joint considerations of the official side and staff side around about independent research and wage growth and a more strategic approach to pay and reward. So it's important to call it a kind of tangible impact that some of that's had on wider discussions that are technically out with Police Scotland and SPA, but really importantly to policing. And the final point is around about the key stage we're in transformation and the work we're doing to make sure that staff associations and trade unions are involved in discussions, engaged, but also that Fair Work's embedded into how we transform in policing as well. So these are clear key areas, but also next year's assessment, if not embedded and mainstreamed into how we report progress against the strategies, will focus more on how the strategies have helped embed Fair Work more broadly. On mute, Chair.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Members, any comments or questions? No, it's very clear, very fulsome. Good to see the progress. Police Federation or Unison, anything? David?
Thanks very much, Chair. Couple of observations to make on the paper. Certainly at 2.6, when we talk about collective voice, certainly TU attendance at an awful lot of Police Scotland SPA meetings is taken as an agreement. That things are being discussed or agreed and going forward, and it's often minuted as such or written as such. So it's welcome that we're going to have we're going to challenge that and see a change to that going forward. Certainly that is key to understanding the process and certainly helps my team to engage in the right places if that's identified. I do have to make a comment on 2.8 on the joint recognition agreement. I'm actually disappointed to see this is on this paper. We consider this private discussions with the trade union and representatives of SPA Police Scotland, so some of the things there are not necessarily something that we'd agree with as the discussions and the purpose of that discussion, so I'm disappointed that that is there for a public forum. I don't think it should have actually been included. That would be, that's everything that I want to make comment on, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful, and I wonder then if offline I could ask you and probably John to think through if there were some things that were included in the paper that perhaps shouldn't have been, to have it resolved and continue to work constructively together, if I may. Okay, so our next item is moving on to the workforce dashboard and the next steps.
Thank you, Chair. So recognise that we have made some progress in terms of dashboards. We know that there's more still to do. Probably the biggest challenge we have actually is just around data extraction from different systems and the extent of manual manipulation that's still required at this point in time. So progress, but still a work in progress. And I think that refers to the action and the action log at the beginning, Chair, where we talked about some divisional pieces. So we're still holding that action and we're still working through that. But aside from that, I'm happy to take any questions on the dashboards themselves. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed. And I know that some of the committee reset work is looking at evidence of impact and outcome measures, and it is very helpful to see dashboard in development, and the proof of the pudding is going to be when we see improvements in the workforce and services as a consequence of that. Any comments or questions from my board colleagues? No, fairly straightforward. Trade unions or federation? No. Straightforward, and it's good. It is good, really good to see the progress, and hope that we'll continue, or I'm confident that we'll continue to see that as we move forwards. Thank you very much indeed for that. Dawn, over to you in terms of the health and safety report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll take the paper as read, but there are a few things that I would like to highlight. So looking at the accident incident statistics, on slide 4 in particular, the data shows that reporting has increased and reportable injury from assaults has decreased to 25.6% against the 5-year mean. So that means that we're not, the RIDDOR reporting has seen a decrease. So this is positive, as it means that the message is getting out there, that the reporting is now being seen to be significant. And the health and safety team have been working hard to ensure that the message is getting out there in regard to how positive that effect can be in terms of capturing that data in order to affect change and improve the practices. In slide 5, as stated in the report, whilst it is encouraging to see an improvement in some divisions, others have unfortunately seen a bit of a downturn. My team have been at the local committee meetings recently to address that in the divisional areas, and the area command level as well has been made aware. Slide 6 looks at the category other. It was quite discerning to me to notice that this other category seems to have, in some areas, taken over some of the actual information in other areas, so it's not being clearly identified as to what those are. So the new form that is still under development, the health and safety team are looking to rectify this, and what we've done is we've had a deep dive into what those other things are, and we're looking to make sure that those categories become able to be selected to reduce that ambiguity. So that we can actually report and that other doesn't become a significant part of the reporting data. So that is under development at the moment to make that more explicit. Slide 7, we'll look at the injury rate is significantly high, in particular to during arrest and custody. Some recent work that has been done in OST in relation to cell vans, which was something that was highlighted before. As a direct result of that, there has been training rolled out in probationer training, and as this was actually because of the trend that was spotted in the accident incident data. So again, it promotes that positive effect that this data can have. So some of that training was actually put on Twitter, so it's a good news story in terms of how we've worked together with OST and health and safety to improve that. Moving on then into the other part of the report, which looks at the health and safety work plan, takes you from slide 8 to 15, and it gives an update of the progress being made within the health and safety work plan in line with our strategic action plan. So highlights in here include the work that's taken place in the health and safety intranet pages, and that has been quite a big piece of work, and that tied in with the on-call review. Also the work that's been done within my team, what we call the policy development group. Lots of movement there to fill some of those gaps that have been identified, to help support staff and officers in their decision making. Everything from fire responses to use of equipment, and also things like first aid needs assessment. So any dialogue that is taking place as well in this area is also being evaluated, and that feedback is helping to shape how we deliver training, what we deliver, and how we continue to improve on our service within health and safety. A couple of other things. So obviously, with our collaboration with the states, we now have access to the Vision platform, which is where all our fire risk assessments are being held. All of my advisors now can help assist supporting divisions and business areas to ensure that actions are actually being taken forward. And it also eliminates the need to duplicate any effort whilst inspections are being carried out. So this is a progress as well. The fire training perhaps needs to still be a little bit promoted there. We're still seeing quite a significant number of people who haven't done the course. An action has been given to me from the Health and Safety Board to pursue this, and so that is an action. And work is also taking place at the moment within LTD as an ask from myself to merge the fire awareness training and the fire warden training so that everyone is confident in sweeping the buildings. I think that's a necessity in the times of hybrid working, certainly. Just a little bit of information in regards to the mutual aid that was provided by Police Scotland in terms of the recent riots that took place around the UK. In particular, I had a discussion with PSNI, who kept us abreast of all the mitigations that were put in place for the safety of our officers while we provided that mutual aid. And we have had no reports of any injuries to officers during that time. And lastly, probably just to update again, as we mentioned at the beginning as part of the actions, but the Surefire, as of yesterday, the figures were showing that we're sitting at now 79% instead of the 77 that was in this report. I did mention already that as part of Moonbeam, that has been seen as a priority. And another thing that we've asked Scope Management is for a bespoke report on how many officers from public order have received these to again prioritise these officers moving forward. And I'll be able to hopefully give a clearer picture of that at the next committee meeting. So that was all the key areas I wanted to pull out from the report, but I'm happy to take any questions. Chair, thank you.
Dawn, thank you very much indeed. Members, comments or questions? Can I ask a couple of things? So at the last meeting, and I looked at the note, and it wasn't as exact and precise as I thought the answer was. Last time, the impression I got was that everyone, within a few weeks, everyone would have been issued with Surefire, everyone who needed them. And now we're seeing that almost a quarter of people, albeit there's been a slight improvement, don't have them. When are we? What is it? Because last time we were told it was lack of stock. So what is it that's stopping Surefire getting to the people who need it?
Thanks, Chair. To be honest, I've been wondering that myself. But I think what we're needing to keep doing from my side in terms of health and safety is keep promoting the need for it. I think that we will see an uptake in relation to Moonbeam, certainly because it has been pushed as a priority in that space. One of the other key parts that I've been speaking to airwave coordinators in relation to is the fact that officers are actually misplacing them, so they are actually being replaced already. So the replacement side is actually probably overtaking the need to get out to the officers who haven't got it. But we can hopefully get assurance to you that in the next, I would say in the next few weeks, that we'll see a marked improvement.
Tom.
It's just a follow on from that, Dawn. I mean, if you were to take it out with policing and health and safety equipment issue like this was came up, it wouldn't be about promotion, it would be about enforcement. What's the cultural difference that you're experiencing coming into policing here that it seems so difficult to get that level? And then finally, the thing is, if health and safety executive came in terms of, would that be enforcement action?
Thank you. Yes, it potentially would be. We've identified it as a risk and we've got the equipment there to hopefully prevent or reduce that risk, and it's not being met. So yes, it potentially would be. I think my experience so far of is that you know, communication, albeit we do use the internet, we do use all our resources in terms of attendance at meetings. You know, our trade unions are involved in these meetings, and support from them in terms of getting that message out as well to members would be extremely helpful. I don't know where the communication's not getting through, because there has been lots of communication in regards to Surefire. It has been a topic on most of the committees, certainly from a local level and at board level. So I don't know if it's just size and scope, and the deployment is just a bit more difficult. It's really difficult to pinpoint what is the actual issue.
Tommy, you wanted to come back on that?
If you don't, I know that
DCC
DCC Spears
in,
is going to come in, but I think it's important to get my own point in first. So I don't actually accept it's a communication issue. It's an enforcement issue by commanders in the operational setting and by managers. If you were to go into a building site in these situations, the site agent would be all over it. And the other thing here is, do we as a committee have an assurance that no officer will be deployed to Moonbeam without this equipment?
Okay, I'll bring DCC Spears in, and then Dawn can come in if needs be.
Thanks very much, Chair. And Tom, to answer your second point, I will get you the assurance that as we work up a plan for Moonbeam, that is the case. And the broader question that the Chair asked, I sense we don't have the information to fully answer that question. I'm happy, Fiona, to take an action to get you a detailed response around the allocation of these earpieces, and I'll provide that in advance of the next meeting. I don't think quite simply the people on this call have the answer, and I'll get that for you.
No, I think that would be really, really helpful, Alan, as soon as you can, because it is, I think, quite remarkable that we're deploying staff without the appropriate safety measures that are so simple. You know, okay. Right, thank you very much indeed for that. Any other questions from members, or can I ask about fire training? Because I'm deeply concerned that we've got members of staff who are not attending fire training, and what action's been taken. So again, I'm wondering if it's, so I fully accept that there's some officer safety training that you might, if you're in middle office, you might not need. I'm not really understanding the problem with not accessing fire training.
I'll come back on that if that's okay, Chair. The fire awareness training is a mandatory core training for all staff and officers, and it's delivered via Moodle. So I don't know why people are not participating in that training, when again it is something that should be pushed. One of the things that I perhaps would like to maybe get into the P&D space is around about onboarding and induction, and making sure that this is an explicit part of that when someone comes into the organisation. This should be a day one, week one course, and I'm not sure if there perhaps is some way of ensuring that that is highlighted as a priority if it isn't already. So it's something I will investigate and bring back to the committee with some update to that.
Okay, so I think the update, Dawn, I think it needs to have timelines and evidence that everyone has gone through their fire safety training, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, comments or questions from Police Federation or the trade unions? No, people can, Brian, yep.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, my Wi-Fi dropped out, so I might not have been able to catch up with a couple of questions you sent to me. The concerns we have obviously here is the rise in number of assaults can be correlated with the backlog of training and officer safety training. There's been a spike there from that, and that's still a concern. Regarding the fire training, I think with all Moodle packages in the organisation, we have Moodle exhaustion, because the amount of training that is online now and not face-to-face is causing that additional pressure on the front line, just when resources are obviously significantly restricted by the numbers there.
Okay, thanks for your comments on that, but I think it's my view that we will have wrap that into the actions that we're requiring. Thank you very much indeed. So I think we're now over onto the inspection, the HMI Inspectorate of Education, in terms of the report that's been available since November, and we were hoping to have our inspector from Education Inspection, but unfortunately due to circumstances beyond all of our control, we can't have that. So very thorough report, very positive report. So Chief Super Gibson, any comments you might want to draw to our attention?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, if I can, if I may. Yeah, so we had hoped Peter Conley would come, but as you say, unfortunately he's been able to come. What I have done, and with your indulgence, one of my colleagues is on the call, Stefan Grabowski. He's our Early Careers and Skills Development Manager. Steph worked, he was the liaison for the HMI inspection team when they visited us last year. And Steph, with your indulgence, will give you a high-level flavour of how that was conducted. And obviously, Steph and I can then take any questions that yourself and members may have, if that's okay.
Okay, very high level would be helpful, thanks, because it's a good thorough paper that we've obviously read. So yes, please, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, Chair, colleagues. Whilst I may not be able to offer the same level of detail to the HMIS external review of MA delivery by Police Scotland as Mr Connolly, I am grateful for the opportunity to take you through the background and overarching principles behind the review. So modern apprenticeships have been in existence since 2017, and as the paper details, since April 2021, all probationers within Police Scotland undertake the MA in Policing, which results in an SUQF Level 7 qualification known as the Certificate in Policing. With regard to the inspection itself, in 2018, Education Scotland were tasked with undertaking reviews across all modern apprenticeships delivered in Scotland, which led to formalised requirement to address the variability in attainment rates amongst providers and frameworks, involve apprentices and employers in planning and learning assessments, along with target setting and progress monitoring, and to improve engagement with employers. As a result of these findings, all modern apprenticeship training providers are in scope for formal inspection, whether they be independent training providers, local authorities, colleges, or employers. Now, inspections usually last for between 1 and 2 days, with a formal report published by HMIS inspectors within 6 weeks of the inspection visit. These reports are sent to Scottish Government, Skills Development Scotland, and are then published on Education Scotland's website for public access. The inspection team require meetings with line management team responsible for the provision of the MA programme, groups of current apprentices, the staff delivering the training activities, the staff responsible for maintaining the quality of provision, and groups of managers of apprentices on their perception of the benefits and disbenefits of the training programme aligned to the framework. There's also formal observation of training activities and apprenticeship progress reviews to best record first-hand evidence of all elements of the modern apprenticeship delivery. So leaning into this inspection whilst considering the complexity of Police Scotland's probationer training programme, I had invited senior representatives from HMIS to attend an awareness event hosted by LTD's Early Careers and Skills Development Department. This was in order to provide an overview of the modern apprenticeship programme itself, and it did give the inspection team a sense of organisational context and helped to ensure the inspection itself would be fully able to explore the 3 elements and the 6 quality indicators as detailed in section 2.2 of the paper. The 41 individuals who were interviewed impressed the inspection team with their drive, passion and commitment to the modern apprenticeship approach, and it was clear that the learning, training and development focus on quality assurance and enhancement is of a high standard, which was again acknowledged through the report's 38 areas of positive progress. We did also welcome the 3 suggested areas for development, which are highlighted at section 2.4. And since the report was published back in November 2023, I'm happy to state that all 3 recommendations have been implemented. Specifically, there is now enhanced feedback to each probationer regarding assessment outcomes of their key skills, which are submitted as part of their electronic portfolio of evidence. Also, the mandated apprenticeship progress review forms, which are completed by the probationer and their tutor or sergeant every 13 weeks, have been adapted to make them more relevant to Police Scotland while still satisfying Skills Development Scotland audit and compliance requirements. For those who require the SQA core skill of numeracy to complete the modern apprenticeship, since March 2024, this has been incorporated into the Module 1 training phase, and those whom are out with this period and currently undertaking the operational phase will continue to be assessed at their week 40 and 66 reviews in line with operational training assessments. With regard to the third recommendation to the tutor constable training, there is now a revised training product which has been developed in conjunction with dedicated research fellows from our academic partners, in addition to a series of continuous development events run for tutor constables. This product has been enhanced through a more interactive approach through development support from LTD's Learning Technologies Department, and the product will be reviewed on a regular basis in line with our training evaluation processes and procedures. So since this paper was originally submitted, we've actually had 2,635 probationers commence on the modern apprenticeship in policing. And with the 38 areas of positive progress and our implementation of the 3 recommendations made by HMIS, I hope that this report provides the committee with a high degree of confidence in Police Scotland's approach to delivering the modern apprenticeship in policing. And I would be happy to answer any questions that I may from my own involvement in the inspection itself. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. That was very helpful, and as you say, good to see such positive inspection, and I think even better to see that you've made the 3 recommendations. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? No, very fulsome. Thank you for that. Tom?
Yeah, just to complement it, the exemplar of Lanarkshire division in probationary training, how does that get scaled up? How does that get transferred across other divisions?
Thank you, Mr. Halpin. If I may be so bold, this exemplar was something that did not necessarily stand out in accordance with normal practices. This high level of approach is actually something that's incredibly commonplace right across Police Scotland. It's just that particular inspector focusing that particular area called that out as a really good piece of work.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay, Katrina, then DCC Spears.
Yeah, just to say it's a delight to read something so positive, isn't it? It was a really interesting report. Thank you.
Okay, DCC Spears.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to highlight, like Director McMahon has joined us, so he'll be able to give a verbal update to staff voice agenda item.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I will bring you in, Tom, in a moment. Alan, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to finish off this item, if it's okay, Chair, just to point out, of the 1,287 items of learning and development that we do in Police Scotland, the probationary training programme, the 104-week programme, is the most inspected element of everything that we do. So it has 6, no less than 6 external scrutineers, of which HMIE are just 1. So again, hopefully it gives the committee some comfort that product is continually subject of external scrutiny, which we welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Any comments from the Federation or Unison? No. Okay, so Brian?
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't quick enough with the hand there. No, from a Federation perspective, very supportive of the process, which enhances the learning of the wider membership. And I'm in dialogue personally with Steph on a regular basis regarding this situation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do you include fire safety training in that?
Chair, that's a great question. I must admit to not knowing, but I'll certainly find out the answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I've now lost count of whether I've missed hands or not, but on the basis, I don't think I have. Thank you very much indeed for that. Tom, a brief verbal report, I think, from you, please.
Chair, yeah, firstly, my apologies. There's been an administrative error. I was unaware that I was expected at committee, so I'm sorry about any discourtesy there. Yes, an update on staff voice. So the Your Voice Matters survey that has run for 8 weeks closed on Monday. We're really pleased with the response rate. We're at 50.4%. The 2021 survey, which was the last time we engaged in this way, was 20% less than that. So we've seen a significant uplift. There's nearly 11,500 colleagues who have responded to that survey. Committee members will recall that it's themed across capturing views around our organisation, our culture, people's perceptions of their own role within the organisation, their views on leadership, their views on the team that they work with, and lastly on their well-being. And it was an expansive survey that covered SPA staff, both forensics and corporate as well. So I am really pleased that we've got over that 50% threshold, because I think that in itself just points to it's a credible survey result. And the Chief Constable, the DEP, have made really clear that we'll use that evidence base to commit to action that then informs both the rollout of things like the 3-year plan, for example, that we'll speak to the board about later in September, but equally about ongoing engagement with colleagues. We are in the process of beginning a procurement process to establish a staff engagement platform. The Chief mentioned this at the board back in June, I think, but the intention behind that is so that we can have regular dialogue, we can conduct pulse surveys quickly, we can do them in a targeted way if there are particular areas of the business that there may be concerns about, or we've heard issues from staff and officers, then we can get a really kind of contemporary view of what people's views are within those areas. And we're going to put that in place. My intention is before the end of the calendar year, we want to have that established. But as I said, we're just beginning the procurement just now. So I'm really pleased with the work that's been done. Progressive Partnership are the company that's delivered that. I'm expecting results as we move into October, and as you would expect, this committee will be one of the primary recipients of those, and you've got the commitment that we'll come back both with an update on the results and some sense of what the follow-on action is. So I'll stop at that point and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's really helpful, Tom. And I think we can offline have a conversation. Do we need a separate, if the results are going to be roughly available for our next people committee, but we might want to give it more time than we could afford at a routine committee. And obviously, if we do have that, then we would have our trade union colleagues and the statutory staff associations there alongside us. Any other comments or questions from members? Unison or Police Federation? Just look forward to getting the results. That's great. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you for joining us at short notice, Tom. That's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Thanks, everyone.
I'm trying to have a break at 12, but let's see how we get on with just a 5-minute break. It wouldn't be long. Jackie, I think we're with you next item in terms of senior officer recruitment process.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is the annual report on senior officer recruitment, setting out a proposed process that would be used for any recruitment required in the next 12 months. It takes on board any learnings from recruitment undertaken this year and any updates that have been provided from the College of Policing. The committee are asked to approve the process that will be used and delegate the implementation of specific processes to the Chair of the Authority with the support of the Chief Executive. I will keep my comments to that, but I'm obviously happy to take any comments from members.
Okay, Tom.
Thanks for the report, Jackie, and it's as in previous years and ideal. One point is that the media exercise within recruitment is restricted only for the Chief Constable, and given the level of the breadth of the executive team here, it might be worth revisiting that, whether that media exercise is required across other appointments.
Thank you for that comment, Tom. I'm happy to take that back in discussion with both the Chief Executive and the Police Scotland team, that we obviously involve kind of heavily in that to see whether that's something that we need to update.
Okay. Members content with that then? Thank you. If I move on, those who attended the Police Authority meeting or heard the Police Authority meeting would know that the chair has asked committee chairs to look at particular priorities for outcome measurements and improvements in each committee, and this is brought here for members' comments and dialogue. So the reason we took this was, again, so looking at the 3 target outcomes, not exclusively because we're clearly moving on with obviously other areas, leadership, wellbeing, strategic workforce planning, but was looking at that case management system so that we can make sure that the environment for staff is good in terms of that workplace culture. Assaults are important, not just on all, we've got officers here, on officers and staff, and then looking at equality and diversity and how we make sure that all our systems and processes are fair. So I'm just looking for members' comments or any view that we need to change slightly before we submit them to the board chair. People on the whole content. It doesn't mean we're not going to be looking at other areas, and I'm more than happy to have comments from Unison or the Police Federation on our choice and any concerns that you might have, but it's not meaning when you're obviously aware of all the work that's going on and that we've been presented with, but these are areas that we're going to look at in particular. No? Okay. So I'm going to take five minutes, Debs.
Yeah, Chair, sorry, can I just take you back to the previous item and the approval by members? Can I clarify, is the approval subject to the request from Tom to add that extra element in?
Yes, thank you.
That's fine. Okay, thank you.
If Jackie's okay with that.
Can I make it subject to asking the Chief Executive and the Police Scotland team for views around whether we should or shouldn't, and I'm happy to engage off table with Tom on that output and other committee members if required.
Chair, just for clarity, I wasn't saying it has to be in that for us to approve of. We approve the document, I'm feeding back that should be reflected in whether it's a requirement going forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And before I let us go, I'm going to suggest, but I'm equally happy if others want to disagree with me, that the 2 items, surefire and sexism, equality and tackling misogyny, we continue as ongoing. Okay. So if we could be back at 12:06, please, and just a quick comfort break for 1 item where everyone else is here, and then board members only for pension forfeiture. Thank you.
apologies, Chair. Am I still meant to be here? Is this private part of the meeting?
No, you're for this item and the item from Vicky. Yes, thank you. But thank you for checking. So we've approved the minute. We're agreeing to close the action log, and we're moving on to Vicky for a verbal update, please.
That's great. Thanks, Chair. First, I'd like to just start off with an apology that there isn't a written report available for this meeting due to the ongoing activity and the dynamic kind of circumstances around that. But of course, I can follow up with a written report if required. So just like to first of all give a bit of context about this health and safety issue within forensic services. At the Forensic Services Committee on the 5th of August, earlier this month, I